This thing is on.
Hello. All right, we're
Hi, Lynn.
Yeah, hey, Cory.
Hello, Fort Worth.
Hello, Fort Worth. Does anyone else feel like they're in a movie set just walking around Fort Worth and the stockyards? I just want to take 1 minute and thank the team at BitBlockBoom for all the hard work and everything that you're doing to make this such a fun and special event. And Gary, of course, our fearless leader, and for bringing us to Fort Worth.
Yeah, amazing job, Gary and team. My first BitBlockBoom, amazingly. This is actually the first Bitcoin-only conference I've ever been to that Swan didn't own. So this is awesome. It's great to see you all here. Thank you.
All right, we're going to get into it with Cory, and we're going to ask some questions. We're not going to talk a lot about Swan today. We're going to talk about Cory's perceptions on what's going on in Bitcoin, talk about AI, talk about financialization of Bitcoin. So these are some of the things we're going to chat about. All right, Cory, let's kind of set the stage. You came to Bitcoin out of technology and out of management consulting and things like this. What was it about Bitcoin that clicked for you that made you drop all of that, those traditional industries, and focus fully on Bitcoin and start Swan?
So these things are never perfectly clean. It's very rare that it's just like a complete switchover. But what did happen right away when I really got interested in Bitcoin is I started doing the 40 hours of podcasts a week. So this was May of 2017, coming up on 9 years now, and it did grab my. There's so many fun, friendly faces here that I somehow missed the last couple of days, but this is awesome. I did go down the time rabbit hole right away, and in 2017. We didn't have the educational infrastructure that we do today. There were very few books about Bitcoin. There were very few podcasts. There was no Stefan Livera yet. There was no Swan out there putting out educational content. Parker hadn't started writing gradually, then suddenly, there just wasn't much out there. I think it was basically like Jimmy and Bitstein. And thank God they were out there and, Andreas videos. But it was also just, drowning in all of the bullshit from the crypto industry pumping all their ICOs. And so it was super noisy. There was not very much Bitcoin signal in the market back then. So, I'm jealous in a way of people that get to come in today. And if you get introduced to Bitcoin or get interested in it, there's just such a wealth of information that you can find. And you can even kind of choose the voice that you want to learn from. Like if Larry Lepard is your guy, you can learn about Bitcoin from Larry. If Lynn Alden is the voice that speaks to you, great. Even if you're more of like a TradFi person, you've got somebody like a Luke Grauman out there that, gives great information about Bitcoin and understands it deeply in the context that you might understand if you're a trader in Chicago or like a Wall Street banker or something like that. So it's amazing the different ways that you can attach to a voice that speaks to you, because there's so many of us out there now. And so that's just been amazing to see. And so starting to spend so much of my time learning about Bitcoin and integrating into the community more, back half of 17, 18, I basically got to fall of 2018. I remember coming back from my usual 6 weeks in Turkey with my family over there. And when I got back, I realized, I don't really think I'm going to be doing tech angel investing and advising of these, Silicon Valley CEOs anymore, because I just don't have any interest in it. And I started rooting around and trying to figure out something to do in Bitcoin. And it took me about 6 months to have the idea for an education-focused on-ramp. And that was like March of 19. And I think tested it with a bunch of people and kind of got solid that I was going to do it, and started the company in June. And announced it from the stage the last time that the BMAG conference was a Bitcoin conference, which was in San Francisco in 2019. That was the origin story. And I didn't actually completely give up consulting until Swan launched. So a lot of people may not know this, but some Unchained people may know. Unchained was actually still an advisory client of mine, and I was like helping out. I think it was their Series Seed Plus that I worked on with Joe and the team from like late 18 till about April. So I think Swan launched on March 13th, and Joe and I hopped on a phone and he was like, I think that, someday we'll probably end up selling Bitcoin, not just custodying it. So we probably have to stop this advisor relationship. So so that was my very last. I used to have like 5 or 6 at a time, and I think Unchained was my very last like advisory client.
That's a good one to have. And Swan, when, from the moment you launched, Swan was always focused on self-custody, that not your keys, not your coins. So that is a little bit of a kind of a mismatch for an exchange. A lot of exchanges or on-ramps, it's fees for holding or custody. How did you balance that, or how do you kind of navigate self-custody and your strong belief, which I know you have, that everybody should self-custody, and all the education you did around it with your business and your business model?
Well, first off, we're not an exchange. There's no order book. It's not really built for selling Bitcoin. This is built basically as a one-way on-ramp to buying and holding Bitcoin for the long term. We have always tried to deliberately select for customers that have a long-term perspective, and we try to make sure they understand that you really shouldn't be getting out over your skis and buying more Bitcoin than you can really comfortably hold for the long term. And I think that keeps us aligned with our customers. I was just having a great conversation with someone over in the back earlier that, our goal is to never have an unhappy customer. And I don't mean that in the sense of like, is our service good? Like, do our salespeople tell the truth, and are they nice? And like, do we do what our products say? I mean, actually aligning what we offer with what is actually good for them. I know that sounds a little bit nudgy, but I promise you it's a great way to run a business, because if you really try to get people to understand, like, this is not a hot trade. And, for 4 or 5 years, we deliberately didn't have a sell button, and you had to actually like call into customer service or, email somebody at Swan to be able to sell your Bitcoin. Eventually we caved and put a sell button on there. But it was really about, you should know what you buy, just like you should do a lot of research on a neighborhood before you buy a house in it. And, you're not going to make 20% of your portfolio gold unless you really understand what it means to hold gold. It's like that with Bitcoin too. So we've never played into, hot money narratives. We've never promoted fake price models. We've never tried to get Bitcoin to be purchased for the wrong reason. And I think that's been a really good way to build trust with clients who have seen over the years that we haven't steered them wrong.
BitBlockBoom started because we were outsiders and we needed a place that felt like home. Stockyards were always a place for people who didn't fit in. Let's go take a look at the cow town. Put on your hat. Let's go. Stockyards weren't just a cattle town. It was a place for cattlemen, traders, outlaws, and gamblers, people that were building something new. And that sounded familiar. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were known to spend time here, and Bonnie and Clyde stayed right here in the Stockyard Hotel. Hotels were great, but they're too normal, and Bitcoin is anything but normal. So we moved BitBlockBoom to a place with some edge and some history. They still run Longhorn Steer down this street every day, just like they did 100 years ago. And BitBlockBoom, well, it's just a few steps away. This is Mule Alley. This is where relationships are made. Bars, restaurants, rodeos, hangouts. Mule Alley is the place to come when the BitBlockBoom day is done. BitBlockBoom was built for people who didn't have a home, and the same thing applies to the Stockyards. Seems like we finally found a home. See you at the Stockyards.
And that has a lot to do with self-sovereignty. And I think, if anything, the BitBlockBoom audience they're probably the core believers in self-sovereignty. How do you view that just broadly, Bitcoin and beyond? And how do you think, what do we all as Bitcoiners need to be thinking about self-sovereignty, especially in the big picture of regulation and how we approach our Bitcoin holdings?
So to me, the story of Bitcoin is it's the widest application of sovereignty technology that we've ever had as a species. And, cryptography is at the core of it, obviously, and makes it possible. But the rise of that point of view and just more and more people understanding that there are elements of their life that they would like to have more ownership over that previously were too difficult to achieve because the technology wasn't there to support it. So Bitcoin as a technology made owning all or a good portion of your wealth outside the system in a self-sovereign way, made that possible. And it's gotten people to then look at every other aspect of their life and different things that they have companies or the government or someone else doing for them. And if they can get technology to do that, and I know we're going to introduce a new product by Swan in a little bit that is in that vein, where it wasn't possible previously to take on that ownership because the tech wasn't there to help you do it. And I think AI plays a big part in this, and it's one of the reasons that we've gotten so heavily into AI over the last couple of years, is because it does provide applied AI, and actually making AI part of the product experience delivers more than we've ever been able to do before. And there are a lot of scary things about it for sure, but there is a lot that's enabling about these new technologies that makes new products available that never could exist before.
Well, I want to dive into a lot more about AI and how you're approaching it, you personally and you as the CEO of Swan. But let's talk about your new product, Vigil, which, frankly, is a lot. Well, we just had the Boomer panel on, and it's something that I'm thinking about. But it's like you can be self-sovereign, but at a certain point, you need to think about, how do I pass my Bitcoin on securely and in a pure way to somebody who may or may not understand Bitcoin at the same level that I do. How are you approaching inheritance planning, or can you talk a little bit more about the new Vigil project that you have?
Okay, so the first thing I would love for you guys to do is take out your phone and open up a browser and just go to vigilprotocol.ai. I don't know if it's actually on a slide here. I don't see it. So, well, you can see it's vigilprotocol.ai, all one word, vigilprotocol.ai. And this is the first time that we're publicly talking about it. And it's the first time that there is actually a wait list open for it. So you can check it out on your own time. So first, what I want to talk about is this. I think I'll talk to, this is perfect. Okay. So what Vigil Protocol is we have this issue, us personally, members of the Swan team, and we hear it from our Swan private clients all the time, that your financial life and your relationships with, FAs, accountants, real estate, insurance, trust and estate attorneys, all of this information lives in some different silos. Most of us have like a Google spreadsheet, maybe like a folder, maybe some things in a safe in a manila envelope, things like that. I know my dad is constantly coming down from Seattle, and every 3 months he's jamming more things in my safe, and it's like, it's going to be here, and I know there's like some key hidden there and all these different things. And it's not just coordinated in one way. And so the idea here is, if you can actually map out, and this is obviously for Bitcoiners, but it's also for anybody that has anything they want to pass along in the event that something happens to them. They want their spouse to be able to have all this really easily, or if something happens to both of you, your kids, have it all in one place. So it's mapping out your entire financial life and being the owner and the coordinator of this information, rather than relying on one of your point solution providers to be that quarterback. And nobody really does a good job at this in the financial industry, unless you're kind of at that 30 million plus on platform, ultra high net worth individual account at JP Morgan, Goldman, whatever. And they're taking, 50 to 80 bips a year. So you're paying maybe 240 grand a year for the privilege of just having family financial continuity. So this is the type of thing that if you can map out all of what you have, if the platform can audit all of your documents, your relationships, and use the intelligence that's gleaned from having thousands of clients doing the same thing, now we're not limited to just what my accountant happens to know. I was just realizing I had an estate attorney that was trying to get me into wings, nings, and dings. I don't know if you hear about this, but it's like a Wyoming irrevocable trust of some kind of thing. And we went down the path of meeting with like 3 different attorneys from different states or whatever, only for the last one, after I've paid all this money, to tell me, by the way, the California legislature is about to pass something that makes this like not legal anymore. So you just wasted your money. And it's like, Vigil knows that, because we know what's going on with everybody everywhere, because it's a platform that benefits from the information that we have from everybody. So the auditing of what's going on and saying like, hey, you should ask your advisor this question. Hey, you should ask your accountant this question. Hey, this trust thing has this element or this clause in it, but that's not really reflected over here in the will. Why don't you ping your estate attorney and ask this question, and really know that you have it nailed. You know, the same way that you would go through like a key ceremony for self-custody in Bitcoin and like absolutely know for sure that you've got it nailed. You know, when you've actually, us nutballs that have actually gone through like, you know, Caravan at Unchained, or gone through the, you know, the Swan key recovery for Swan Vault or something, like, you know for sure that you actually have it nailed, and now you can sleep well at night. SWAN. No, I'm just kidding. You know, sleep well at night. It's great, right? So you map it out. It's audited, you get it right, and then we're actively monitoring. Vigil is constantly actively monitoring and seeing that it's up to date, that you haven't missed some regulation, that, you know, you had a kid. Oh, the kid, that means you have to change these 4 documents, send these notes, here's drafts, you know, change it if you want to. And then the activation is just so important, because you can actually do a dry run and get a run book and like make sure that you really are fine going on that business trip, and everything's going to be fine. And if you want to go on vacation with your husband or your wife, like, the kids are going to be fine. It's not going to end up in probate, because you know for sure you've got that box checked. And what I love about this is, I think that, you know, what Bitcoin did for me and my family over the last decade is like, I don't feel like I have to be a hedge fund trader and stay up on all the financial news all the time. And I don't feel like I have to have a second job of being like my own financial manager at night, or just pay exorbitant fees to somebody that's, you know, sorry, but not going to be the best money manager. They never are at these levels. So it just democratizes for the rest of us what really is only available at that, you know, super high wealth level. And, you know, it lets us chop the price 99%. That's the whole point. You know, you're supposed to be able to do this for technology is supposed to be the great enabler. So I love just putting this control back in people's hands. So I highly recommend vigilprotocol.ai. And sign up for that, and take a look at it in your own time. I'm here, Cory@swan.com, if you ever want to email me about it and learn more.
And this is part of Swan, or is this a part? Okay,
yeah.
So
yeah, it's just, you know, this is what we've learned is like, there are things that Bitcoiners need, where there's a certain, again, this gets to this approach towards sovereignty and things that we want to understand, like, it's a certain type of customer that has a lot of lookalikes. So there's actually, you know, 45 million households in the US with like, you know, 500 grand to 30 million of assets. Like, that's a lot of people that look like Bitcoiners. And yes, of course, we're going to find clever ways, and, you know, Brady's going to, you know, ping them once or twice a quarter with, hey, just in case you're interested in Bitcoin, you know, I mean, we do hope it'll be a nice cross-sell opportunity from Vigil. But, you know, there are a lot of people that have these pains that we all have as well. So yeah, really excited for this.
Tell us the backstory of Vigil. Did you vibe code this, or how? Cory, I know that you personally have been really interested in playing around with the new AI tools. You individually, you as the CEO of Swan, tell us a little bit about how you're approaching AI inside of your company, and did that have a role to play in this?
So I used to code a little bit in the late 90s. So I worked on the local TV station website when I was a really crappy broadcast journalist in Missouri in the late 90s. And I went to work for Microsoft and was mostly doing like interactive production, but a little tiny bit of coding. And so in 1999, I got like a web author certificate from New Jersey Institute of Technology, early remote learning. And I even got a web developer certificate, which I did not deserve. I deserved the first one, but I just basically aced the test on the last one. I didn't know what I was doing. I haven't coded since 1999 on anything. Like I even had somebody like make my website in 2013 when I left Google for my, you know, angel business or whatever. So I hadn't done anything, but the rise of Claude Code was just so loud in my personal and professional network over the holidays that I decided to, you know, give it a shot. And I don't think it was the first time I ever opened the terminal window on a Mac in my entire life. I hadn't seen the black screen since, a long time. And it was amazing what you could get done. So like I vibe coded, some of you guys have participated in speakeasies, which we've started using, which is like, live video chats. And it was a way to to do that. So I vibe coded that and rolled it out, and it worked. And then of course, Jan, my partner, is very security minded. He's like the Max Levchin of the Bitcoin industry, and he freaked out, and they rebuilt it on secure infrastructure. And I was like, well, I got another one. So that I vibe coded Vigil and got it looking the way I wanted to, not functional. And obviously it has to do like lots of AI API calls, and I didn't hook all that stuff up. And Jeremy, raise your hand, my definitely co-founder of Vigil protocol there. So he's taken it over and actually built it. It is the first product of Swan Agentic, which is a whole new business unit inside of Swan that we started in January. And Swan Agentic actually doesn't have employees. It only has board members. So like the board members of Vigil are Jeremy and Philip, known in the Bitcoin industry as P. And it's staffed with like 9 agents that fill different roles and work basically 24/7 and have sprints and all this kind of stuff. And they're building Vigil, and it's one of 3 products that are being built currently that way with a fully agentic workforce. Even Ashley, our head of HR, is now head of workforce intelligence, because she actually manages like our agents and our agent spend, as well as our employees and contractors.
It's fascinating to me, and it must allow you to think. When you think about Swan, or you think about a company and you're growing it, you don't have to think about all the hires. You can have agentic AI start the process and even take it a long way. Even Block has reduced their workforce by so much by relying on AI. But going back to Jan's concern about security, when you release these agents into your company, how are you thinking about the security of them and self-sovereignty? I guess is we were talking about that too, but I think we all are curious about this. But
yeah, you have to be extremely careful. The guardrails have to be insane, and the human reviews are extremely intense, and the tooling and different a lattice work of different security vendors that are checking everything. Because you can really screw it up, and a lot of people are, I think the gamers say, getting pwned by bad code injections and things like that. So you have to do it carefully, and that's something that was really obvious to us, even back in December, January. For someone like me that's not, a security engineer or a site reliability engineer or something like that, I should be vibe coding prototypes and then handing it off and then have it basically get rebuilt. The magic of what Jeremy, with his background actually being a software engineer and being the guy building Vigil, in charge of building Vigil, is that basically he and Jan figured out how to build the hooks so that it was already built on all the things that can plug into Swan in the right way, all of the infrastructure and the security and all the InfoSec and everything, so that you don't have to rebuild it. You're actually building it for the right hooks. But porting things over from an agentic environment into a production environment has like ridiculous levels of screens and filters and tests before you can say like, okay, that's secure and that can go live.
Tie in AI back to Bitcoin. There was a recent study by the Bitcoin Policy Institute that said the preferred form of medium of exchange for agentic AI is Bitcoin versus stable coins or versus anything else. How are you viewing this? And could Swan become like the on-ramp for AI agents to have Bitcoin? Or, just broadly, how are you thinking about the intersection of AI and Bitcoin?
Well, look, it's been going a little slower than I wanted it to have humans move, beyond store of value and really start using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. And so if there's a new vector of attack where agentic payments end up using Bitcoin in many cases, I think that's fantastic. Now, obviously, all the big centralized companies like the Stripes and the Coinbases are pushing dollars because they're part of the dollar network, and we're always and forever forward. Now that we've beaten the shit coins, the real fight now is Bitcoin versus dollars, and that's going to be basically the rest of the century. So, just understand that's going to play out in battle after battle, venue after venue. You're going to be in a fight where Bitcoin is very, very small and is the David going against the dollar behemoth. But at the end of the day, if you understand Bitcoin, you do understand that it's better money. It's a better store of value. And at some point, we're going to reach a tipping point where so many people and so many companies prefer to receive Bitcoin that they're going to keep it in Bitcoin regardless of what the medium of exchange is. And then if the person paying and the person receiving are both wanting to use Bitcoin because they hold Bitcoin, then there's no point in translating to dollars or anything else in between. And that's when MOE really takes off.
Well, our time is flying by, and there was so much more I wanted to ask you, especially about financialization of Bitcoin and your thoughts on that, which I think we know part of them. But we have a minute left. Can you talk a little bit about where you see Bitcoin today and what your vision would be of how we progress from here, given the amount of financialization of Bitcoin that's gone on in the last 18 months or 2 years?
First off, that's a scammer. That Twitter handle on the screen there. I'm Cory Swan, CORYSWAN. I don't know where they found this double underscore Cory Klippsten person, but that's not me. Do not follow that person. Good. Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, I'm Cory Swan on Twitter and Cory@swan.com if you want to hit me up. And you're welcome to. This is, look, where are we in Bitcoin? I mean, I think we obviously have seen the asset become financialized. We obviously have seen that, what Hal and Satoshi, what they talked about back in 2009, 2010 on message boards was that it was inevitable. It's not that you wanted it to be one way or another. It's that there would be 10,000 Bitcoin banks or banks with Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and that there would be different financial services providers that worked in Bitcoin. And that would be part of the natural progression. You can't have 8 billion people on Earth using Bitcoin, owning Bitcoin, whatever, without a lot of financialization. But at the end of the day, the power is still with the people because we can always withdraw to on-chain Bitcoin, or we can choose to own on-chain Bitcoin instead of a paper receipt. And so what I would say is, yes, the world has changed a lot since the launch of the ETFs back in January of 2024. What we should view that as an industry that actually cares about on-chain Bitcoin, hopefully in self-custody, but at least withdrawable from delegated custody or in collaborative custody, is we all view that now as the top of funnel, where a lot of people sure are getting their first exposure to Bitcoin in an ETF paper wrapper, but they have selective attention for Bitcoin content, they have selective perception for Bitcoin content, and they're more likely to pick up that book from Larry or listen to that podcast that Lynne's on, or read something that Brady writes on the Swan blog or whatever it is. And it's so much easier to get them to take that step than it was from 2017 to 2023 fighting against like $100 billion of altcoin VC money, just lying constantly saying that shitcoins were better. So this is a better position. We don't need to fight the last battle. The battle that we're in is the battle of the dollar network. And what we're seeing, obviously, is like a lot of co-opting of the Bitcoin industry and the Bitcoin space by the dollar network. And that's inevitable because it's way easier to make money just having, treasuries earning interest than it is selling Bitcoin services.
Cory, thank you for being a warrior for Bitcoin. We know your position. We know your things about keeping it pure and all that you do for it. So thanks a lot. Thank you all for your attention. Cory from Swan.
Thank you, Lynne. That was great. Appreciate it.